Welcome to Behind the SME, the podcast where we dive into the stories of founders, leaders, and visionaries of small and medium-sized enterprises. As the CEO of a small business myself, I want to uncover what drives the success of SMEs by talking to those who are in the trenches, building their businesses from the ground up. I hope you enjoy the episode. I think I might say this every time, but I'm very excited about having you in.
I'm very excited to be here.
You're going to listen to the other episodes and go, he does say that every time. But I'm genuinely excited because you and I have spent many hours talking about our respective businesses, coaching each other, challenging each other. And you know this already, but you're someone I have an enormous amount of respect for.
Likewise.
That's very kind. So I know that our audience is going to love hearing some of your stories.
Well, you've made me think a lot. Actually.
Have I?
Yeah.
What, just recently or over the years?
No, over the years.
Over the years. Oh, that's good. Yeah, you have a very good way of asking questions that make me think, and so I feel the need to to give it back. But so our listeners have a bit of an understanding of who you are. Just give us a whistle-stop tour of who John Wyer is.
Okay, so I trained as a landscape architect many years ago, and I started working before I went to college. I started working in a nursery and for a contracting business while I was filling in time for a year, and I didn't realize at the time, but that was going to influence my whole career as to how it shaped out. So I did 5 years training as a landscape architect. And then ever since then, the fact that I worked in contracting and in horticulture meant that I gravitated towards working on a design and build basis. Now, design and build in our business doesn't mean what design and build usually means in the construction business. So we are design led and we control the whole process from design, master planning, right the way through the construction process and into aftercare. We build very long relationships with our clients, and the reason we have that process is because it allows absolute control of the quality. So we work at the very top end of the landscape industry, and our clients are typically organizations and people who love landscape. They understand the value of landscape and what it brings to a project or to their lives, and they've got the resources to do that. And that's actually quite a wide range of people, apart from ultra high net worth individuals, but also some quite prosaic organizations like Peabody is a big client of ours, and we do quite a lot in the health sector. So it's quite diverse, but those two factors, the means to buy it, if you like, and an understanding of what we can bring to a project or to their lives. That's our clients in a nutshell.
Yeah, amazing, and some incredible spaces you've created over the years, and an amazing footprint and legacy that you left behind through your work. How old's the business? How long's it been running?
32 years. Yeah.
Wow, that's quite a tenure, and obviously I imagine an incredible journey. So the whole premise of this podcast is to understand the big lessons that people have learned from running SMEs over the years, and just get under the bonnet a little bit and understand exactly how leaders have faced challenges, how they've overcome them, and what they might be able to share with others that might help along their journey. Now, you and I spoke during this really interesting period that Bowles Wyer had a couple of years ago. And I remember giving you some very useless advice, probably, but it stuck with me anyway. I don't know if it stuck with you, but I remember saying to you that you just described the challenge that your business was facing. And I remember saying to you that, you need to CEO the hell out of this. This is all of your years worth of experience.
You did say that, I remember.
coming together.
And I remember thinking, but I might be bust next month.
Yeah. But really importantly, you didn't.
No,
you didn't
that's
go
right.
bust. And I remember saying to you, this is years worth of experience and challenges that I've overcome, and people problems and project problems and everything combining together to take your business basically from the brink, and you did it. And some of the stories that you've shared with me are extraordinary, and I'd love just to hear, I guess, what happened and what you learned from it.
So I'm going to take you back 5 years before that.
Go on.
5 years, about 5 years before that, when I went through a quite a difficult. So partnerships are like marriages. You spend a lot of your time, if it's just two of you in partnership, which is what Bowles Wyer was, you spend a lot of your time with that person. You have to see the world the same way, and that's the base rock of that the whole business is built on. And I think sometime around the mid 2000 teens, I came to the conclusion that the partnership that I was in was no longer working, and I needed to do something about that. And I was under pressure from other shareholders and senior employees to do something, and I realized that it was going to destabilize the whole business if I didn't. I went through a very sort of bloody process and came out the other side. That was, in the end, resolve things. But in the process, the business went through a regeneration and a refocusing. And a lot of the lessons that I learned then, I sort of I built on later on. And I think the principal thing that really reshaped the business was that we refocused on our clients. So this was 2017 by the time we come out the back of all this. We refocused on our clients, and we went through a very detailed process of market positioning, really. We got an external consultant in to research our clients and what they liked about us, what they didn't like about us, and in comparison to our competitors in different fields, because our business is both quite is vertically quite integrated, because we go through the whole process, but also we're laterally across lots of different markets. It was quite a complicated process, but we did that, and thought very carefully. We learned a lot from our clients, actually, and they said some things about us that surprised us, good things that surprised us. A lot of it was what we expected, but a lot of it wasn't. And we completely refocused our market position, our position within the market. And that, I think, was a process that people, you have these consultants, your business inside out, and they tell you all this stuff, and you think, well, it's like somebody explaining to you how an airplane flies. You get lower pressure on one side of the wing and higher pressure on the other side, and that keeps the aircraft aloft. And then you see this sort of 50-ton thing flying through the sky, and you think that doesn't really make sense. Why does it actually stay up there? And it was a bit like that when they were talking about the market positioning. And of course, like the next day, nothing changes. But 18 months later, I thought, actually, we're getting more of this sort of client. And 2-3 years later, I could definitely see that we had completely changed our position in the market, and that we were getting clients who liked what we wanted to do and how we saw the world. I mean, there's no point in BMW trying to sell to a Skoda driver or Skoda trying to sell to a BMW driver, despite the fact that both drivers probably just use the car for the school run, the supermarket, go to work, whatever. They're completely different groups, and we had to find our tribe, and that was a really important lesson. And coming out of that also was that we had to really work on and reinforce the culture within the business. And the culture within the business became a real focus. As you know, we've discussed this many times. The culture within the business became a real focus for how we would build and expand the business, which we did expand the business, particularly the aftercare side, actually. But the whole business grew quite significantly after that.
Yeah.
So
just jumping in, I'm fascinated by the move to suddenly go, right, we need external help on this. What you're talking about is identity, isn't it? You wanted to discover your identity as an organization, and you weren't able to do it internally. Otherwise, you would have done it internally. What were some of the signals, I suppose, that led you to recognizing that that's what the company needed?
That's a really interesting and quite difficult question. I
You're
think that's what I come to expect. I think we'd set up quite a big contracting business that was a sister business, and we were merging the two, and I think we realized that the market positioning at that part of the business and the market positioning of the main part of the business were not completely aligned, and I think that was the catalyst for undertaking the work.
But how did that manifest itself in terms of what you saw as the leader? Did you have meetings where you could just tell that they were on a different tangent to where your head was at? Or
I think it was partly the work that they were getting. Some of it was very closely aligned, but quite a lot of the inquiries that they were getting were not so closely aligned.
So in your mind, you're thinking, we need clients such as X, but you were winning clients such as Y, and no one really understood the problem with that.
Yeah, and it was becoming increasingly value driven. Economic value driven, pounds driven, and typically our clients are not motivated by that. They're motivated by us understanding them and delivering what they want. And one of the big lessons that we learned from that time was conversations with clients. The more you talk to clients, the more that you and they understand what it is that they want. And they don't understand themselves a lot of the time.
And how long had you been trading at this point?
We've been trading 20 odd years, 23 years or something.
Amazing. Like that. Amazing. We had a guest in recently that was striving for product market fit, and we spent 20 minutes talking about conversations with clients, and they didn't at the time have a product, and it's just fascinating that quarter of a century into your journey, that's still a large kind of learning for you, that actually things do change over time, and you do still need to keep the conversation
absolutely
going.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely right. And I would my wife is involved in the business as well, as you know, and I'd say, well, I just wish I'd learned this stuff 20 years ago, and she said, you weren't ready for it. It's typical sort of conversations you have with your partner, but and she's probably right. I probably wasn't ready for it. And, the business was growing very rapidly, and I didn't realize, I think, how much it was related to me personally in the early years, and that sort of carried it through. But as the business grows, you can no longer do that, and you have to sort of examine, particularly when you start bolting on other people and other businesses. If you acquire people, we acquired another much smaller business, and it's possible quite easily to dilute the culture of the business, and you're just focusing. And a lot of business consultancy, particularly, let's say coaching, but a lot of business consultancy is built around the sort of fetishism of growth and economic drivers, and actually successful businesses are rarely built on that sort of set of premises.
Yeah, super interesting. So in your journey, the understanding of your identity allowed the creation of a culture which was aligned with identity. Identity had to come first.
Yeah, absolutely right.
So how do you do that? You said it didn't happen overnight, which I think is a very powerful
message. It took 18 months.
Yeah.
It took 18 months, and a third of the people in the business sitting around the table talking about it, going away, talking amongst themselves about it coming back, and it was led by my wife, Vicky, who's a director and a shareholder in the business. And that was deliberate because she had less of an operational role than the other directors. And so I think the rest of the staff saw her as more accessible and that it wasn't being driven by the directors, but was being driven by the staff.
So she was head of cultural change.
She still is.
Is
she? She's head of culture and values.
Oh, really?
And people.
Wow, you have a title for it. Incredible.
And she's also head of sustainability as well. Those are her two roles. Yeah.
So how does one, so you're a business owner, you have you've had a bit of an identity check, following a crisis or not, but you've got a clear understanding that your identity, the identity you want, is not the one you have. You need to go through a process of cultural evolution or change. What's the first thing you do? How do you start that?
So we looked at all the different areas in which this would apply to the business. And this sounds like a nightmare now, but it was a necessary process. We identified 17 separate projects within the business that we had to do, which covered everything from how we prepared quotations, how we interviewed people, how we did onboarding, how we did grievance procedures, how we went through review processes with people, how we conducted internal meetings, and absolutely everything. And there were, and of these, I think we completed 16 of the 17 projects. And there was one that we never quite completed, but it was pretty successful, actually. It had a real, and it reinforced the existing culture to a great deal, to a great extent, and it sort of crystallized bits that were sort of floating around there that we wanted to strengthen as well.
Sure. So that internal culture then manifested itself in the type of work that you were doing?
I think, no, that came from the market positioning.
Okay.
So how it manifested itself is in how we were doing the work.
Right.
And,
okay.
And I think this is why, coming on later, I learned the value of that culture, and how you can never stop working on it. It's a constant process.
So how do you describe the culture of Bowles Wyer?
So it sounds very corny when you say it. So the first thing is that we have a purpose as a business. Purpose-led businesses, big cliche, but it really means something to us. And the purpose of our business is to enhance lives and landscapes, and not just our clients' lives or our clients' landscapes, but for everybody. So that has to imbue itself in the way that we procure things, and the way that we carry out our work, so that we leave a light footprint environmentally, and our social aspects. I suppose we've never gone through the B Corp process, and we probably should, but it's a similar set of social and environmental aspects to the way that you think and the way that you work, and it is of course centered around what we do for our clients, but it's much broader than that. It's the people who we work with, internally, externally, clients, suppliers, people who work for Bowles Wyer, and it's also how we do things. So that's our sort of purpose as a business. Our internal values are built around integrity. Trust is one of our values, and that is a real cornerstone, practical cornerstone of how we run the business, because about twice a year we have a whole get together for everybody in the business, and we talk about issues and projects and stuff like that. We usually have speakers in as well. And at one about 2 years ago, I said, this business is like a bumblebee. It shouldn't fly, but it does. And the reason for that is that a lot of our competitors on the design side are actually our clients on the construction side, because we also build for other designers. And how does that possibly work, that our competitors are also our clients? And the reason is that trust is one of our key values. And then we also have excellence. That's pretty clear. We work at the very top end of the market. It's what our clients expect of us. And the third one is creativity. And creativity here doesn't just mean about design. It means about challenging people. If you can think of a better way of doing something, you need to share that. To be constantly growing as an individual, to be the best version of yourself. So those are our sort of three core values.
Okay. So I'm getting a picture. We're building up, I think, towards said crisis. I mean, my experience of running a business is that there's pretty much something going on every year, be it COVID or some kind of market correction or X or Y or Z. You become kind of hardened to these things.
Yeah.
But this sounds like it was fairly unique as a challenge. So yeah, talk us through it.
Okay, so coming out of the back of the internal buyout, the business grew very quickly, and we had quite a detailed plan of how we were going to grow the business. We were going to sort of roughly double to triple the size of it over a 10-year period, and we were actually on track for that when the sort of crisis hit us like a truck, and we were so focused on where we were going. It's amazing. Sometimes in retrospect, you think, how did I not see that? So focused to getting to the other side of the road, I didn't notice a truck coming towards us.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I think what happened was that we were platforming for growth, and we were growing. So in platforming for growth, we had quite high overheads, but we had an investment strategy for how we were going to do that, and everything was on track. And then, first of all, we had COVID, but that actually was quite a bonus for our business generally, economically, because people became very focused on the environment and their gardens, and developers suddenly woke up to the value of landscape. So that was okay. Once we got through that crisis, it was generally quite a positive thing. And then Russia invaded Ukraine, and at the same time as that, the energy prices started to spike. Our business is very energy intensive in lots of ways. Bricks, steel, cement, they all require lots of energy. And the combination of COVID and the war in Ukraine also disrupted other things like timber. So we had about £5.5 million worth of work that was negotiated on fixed price contracts, which was the norm, entirely the norm in I would say late 2020, early 2021. We negotiated 3 contracts that were on fixed price, and then Russia invaded Ukraine. In the year previous to that, actually, energy prices had started to spike already, and the economy was overheating. The effects of Brexit were starting to affect the labour market, and I remember very clearly that we had. I went out on an inquiry, and I came back into the office, and Dan, my MD, and Katie, my FD, were in the meeting room, and Dan said, "I think you need to come in here." He said, I just wanted to start going through some issues with Katie, and he said, "Sit down." And then my FD said to me, "Well, we have enough money to pay the salaries at the end of June." This was the 6th of June. "We have enough money to pay the salaries at the end of June, but not July." Wow. And I was like, and then we just sort of went into freeze for just trying to work out how we were going to manage this situation, and we had been aware. We had been shaving our overheads. We'd become aware in the October that our costs were too high, but we didn't want to change our strategy. You have a strategy, you can't change it, which is another lesson I learned. We're on course. We've just got to do this, and we had to completely rethink. And initially, that was a process of just how we, manage the crisis, and which we did. And we went through everything. We took 25% out of our overheads over the next couple of months, and which was it wasn't a case of shaving, it was taking an axe to it. And, that was uncomfortable at times. All non-revenue generating staff went down to 80% salary. Directors took a 3-month salary holiday, and, cut out pensions, cut out all that sort of stuff. Just, pretty brutal things, actually. But the staff, 90%, 95% of the staff completely understood that and backed it. There are a few people that we were in a cost of living crisis, and we were telling people that they should cut their wages. It's not going to be popular. But I think most people saw it, that they didn't know the full extent of the crisis. But to give you some context, in the year before we got to that situation, that June, building costs, according to government figures, across the board had gone up by about 26%. Now, labour had only gone up by about 7% at that point, went up more the following year. But if you take labour out of those figures, that meant that the cost of building materials had gone up by about 41% in that year. So there we were, fixed price contracts, we were on a margin of about 25%, and so I was basically sending guys to site and burying money. So you're in this situation where not only had this hole opened up that money was pouring into, but it was getting bigger all the time, and I was contractually obliged to carry on shoveling money into the hole. So how do you get out of that? Well, coming out of that, the importance of talking to our clients, and we went and saw the 3 major clients that that affected this particular situation, and one of them went completely off the wall, and we got into some fairly serious arguments with, but we resolved it. The other 2 were very angry to start with, but said okay, because they were facing the same thing from main contractors who they were working with. And in fact, that doubled and tripled the problem for us, because main contractors were in exactly the same situation, worse in some cases. And so they were doing everything they could to hang on to your money. They would short value you at the end of each month, and they would also find ways of delaying the payments as much as they could. So, I'd be doing, say, £100,000 worth of work, which normally I'd make 25% on, but actually it was costing me 110,000 to do it, and then they'd only pay me 70, and they'd pay it 3 weeks late. And so it was a spiraling problem, but we got it under control. I lent the business a load of money, which it's paid back quite, about a year later, and all the other measures we got put in place. Actually, by the September of that year, looking back, we turned the corner and we were into profitability, but we weren't certain of that probably for another year.
I think you told me that at the peak you were having a daily board meeting.
Yeah, sometimes twice a day.
Really? Wow. But it was moving that quick.
Yeah, it was moving incredibly quickly.
Yeah.
And I think until that happens to you, you don't realize how quickly that situation can get out of control. And especially in a business like ours, where the margins, the true margins after overheads are relatively tight. Construction business, you know what it's like. It's tight margins, and until you're in that situation, you don't realize the amount of cash coming in and going out of the business, and how you manage that cash flow becomes really important. And the speed at which the situation can change is really frightening.
Yeah.
I mean, businesses can fold within a matter of days, weeks or days. And ISG, major construction business, went bust last week.
Yeah.
And that is coming out of the back of this crisis. It's just that they've been living off the assets that they had and selling them, and it's come to a crisis now 2-3 years later. And the same with Osborne's at the beginning of this year, £300 million business went under. By the time it went under, it was only doing 100 million because they'd sold off all the profitable bits of the business, and they could the construction business just caved in because of these issues 3 years ago. And there'll be others.
Tell me what did you learn about leadership from that whole process?
I think the principal lesson that I learned is quite a hackneyed one, if you like, which is that is what leadership is really all about. It is what you said about years of experience and all that, but ultimately it's about leading and taking control of the situation and allowing people to get a grip and be confident and do what they're good at and not run around in circles. And we had the directors were shell-shocked, absolutely shell-shocked. It was to try and get them out of that situation and allow them, they're all working for us because they're all brighter and better than me, and to get them back to doing what they're really good at and help get us out of that situation is really what I saw my role as, and talking to everybody, constant communication with all the staff and especially with all the directors, and allowing them, and they were very creative at coming up with solutions, and it actually as a group of people, it really has done more than anything else to bond us together tightly as a team.
Interesting.
That we think as one now a lot of the time. I mean, we're all different people and we have different views on things, but we are completely aligned, and that is coming out the back of that crisis that's done that.
I'm interested by this whole process, right? Because in that position, you want to be transparent, you want to be authentic, you want to be able to explain the gravitas of the situation so that they understand some of the decisions being made. But at the same time, you want to instill confidence, I assume, that you've got a plan, eyeballs are on you.
Yeah.
How do you balance that?
That is a really good question, and I think it has graded answers. So because not everybody in the business can know what's going on. It's not practical. It's not advantageous. It's not that I'm misleading anybody. So the leadership team, the directors, we were completely open, and how I
total transparency, nothing hidden.
Yeah.
And were you your full 100% vulnerable self in there, or were you having to go, right, John, people are looking at you right now. I need to be confident, solid, show that I've got direction, that I know I've got a plan.
I had to both. So I did. So I remember somebody asking me a few years ago in a magazine article, "What are you afraid of?" And initially, I sort of said, "Well, I'm not afraid of anything really." And they said, "Well, you must be afraid of something." And I said, "I'm afraid of failure." And that goes back to something, all of these things can be traced back to your childhood, and I was a serial failure academically and in lots of other ways until I got my life together and started the business and it all took off. And so I was terrified of reputational damage and failure. I was quite a senior figure in the industry and I just, that's what really scared me. How do I, this is a really successful business. It's really well known. How do I then stick my head above the parapet and say, we screwed up, guys, we're going bust? I was terrified of that actually. And that did sort of focus me. I think that sort of fear focused me. And I had to face up to it and say, and my wife, Vicky, said, people just think, well, if it can happen to them, it can happen to anybody, and that didn't cut a lot of ice with me, but but she's right, of course. But so then I sort of thought, how do I instill confidence in people, because I had to face these demons internally in myself, and everybody was going through the same sort of thing. They're afraid of different things, but they were all afraid of what this might mean for them personally. And so what I did was simply to what I had done when I was going through the internal buyout, which is that I sat down and methodically planned for every eventuality, and sometimes spent some money, which we didn't have a lot of, taking advice, planning for those eventualities, planning for how we could avoid a sudden collapse of the business. If we had a structured collapse, what it was going to look like afterwards, what the options might be, partial sales or whatever, looking at all the different things and actually getting documents in place so that we could do that if necessary, so that we were in control of the situation. And the more I started to do that, the more the other directors all really bought into that process, and they felt that you can't control what hits you from the outside, but you can control how you react to it. And that put us back in the driving seat. And once we felt like we were in control of the situation as much as we could, the panic subsides, and you just then look, you follow your plan. And that's why we were having board meetings every day.
Yeah. Such an amazing story. I mean, with hindsight, obviously, amazing is probably not quite the word, but I'm interested to know if lots of people listening to this will have an understanding, will think that you've learned a lot from the process, and perhaps there's some kind of nuggets that you might be able to explain to people about how you approach business now. And so they can not have to go through this, turbo-sized crisis to pick up some of those lessons.
So I think it boils down to both the hard and the soft levers, if you like. And the hard ones are the sort of stuff that everybody knows about. What your overheads are, what your fixed costs are, and how you upsell, how you drive the top line, how you drive the bottom line, and all of those things. And we got caught short on that because we were platforming for growth, and we had to then, as I said, we had to take an axe to our overheads and do some really hard stuff. But I think the soft levers get forgotten about, and those are really, really important. And that's why when you asked me the question at the beginning, I said, let's go back 5 years, because talking about our market positioning, our purpose, our culture, our values, actually those things have a bigger driver on success within the business than anything else. And it doesn't really matter how you measure success, whether it's awards, whether it's bottom line, whether it's customer satisfaction or staff engagement. Culture reinforces all of those things. And culture, really positive culture, is probably the biggest driver of increasing the bottom line than anything else, because staff who are really engaged with the purpose and the project, they will enjoy their work more. They'll work better. They'll probably work longer, although I don't want them to particularly. They'll engage more with clients. They'll understand what they're trying to achieve, and that's infectious. That sort of behavior is infectious, and the person next to them will feel the same, and you get this sort of combined sense of purpose in a business, and that really affects the bottom line. And it also, you get into an alignment with your clients. They understand what those values are. They understand that you're a values-driven business. And that then means that when you have a high level of engagement with clients, they're happier. because you achieve their outcomes. And it doesn't really matter which way you cut it. Happy clients are more profitable than unhappy clients.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the contracts are, how you structure the quotations, how you do the invoicing. Happy clients will pay more than unhappy clients always. And so those things became part of. They weren't the real driver in how we addressed the short-term problem, after June the 6th, how do we get out of this problem? Because that had to be all the hard things, because we had to do it immediately, and, but they did. So we went from a situation where we had roughly £750,000 worth of debt, which, given the size of the business, was quite significant, but to lots of businesses might not be very much. And we went to a situation where we'd paid all of that off and had £750,000 in the bank within the space of about a year. And we couldn't have done that without reinforcing the culture of the business. And I think we realized how important that was, because post-COVID it had got diluted. Naturally some people wanted to leave the business because lots of people reassessed what they were doing post-COVID, and they went into another industry. They went to live in the Orkneys or whatever. And so we lost a percentage of the business. Also, we were growing, so we were bringing new people in, and we were focusing on the finances and not focusing on the soft culture initially. But then we realised how important that was, and that was the thing ultimately that allowed us to not only recover the profit, pay off all the debt, build up enough cash to start paying profit share again, and to put the business back on a growth path. And we couldn't have done that without learning those lessons that we'd learned 5 years before about positive culture and how important that is in a business.
Let's finish up by talking about growth, because you and I have spoken about this before. There seems to be this obsession with growth, doesn't there?
Yeah.
And we've both asked each other why.
Yeah.
Why are people obsessed with growth? And I know the textbook answers, and I like to push back on it as well and go, for what reason? Why should one grow? I know, like I said, I know the reasons why one does. I'm interested in your take on growth now.
Okay, so I have a background in horticulture, and I'm going to apply a horticultural analogy here.
There we go.
We've all got house plants, and or plants in the garden, and plants grow when the opportunities are there, the light is there, the water is there, the soil is there. And depending on what the competition is, they reach an equilibrium, and trees don't go on growing forever. They stop at a size where they're in an equilibrium with that environment, depending on what the competition is, how much light, water, nutrients they're getting, how effective they are in converting light into sugars and sugars into growth, and so on. And businesses really are no different. And that growth, there is a great deal that you can do to make businesses agile and flexible, but growth ultimately is opportunistic, and it isn't something that you can just say, right, we're going to grow the business to 200% bigger than it is now, because that's facile. That doesn't really mean anything. And in the real world, as we're discovering globally now, you can't just go on growing everything all the time, because you've run out of stuff, and it introduces all sorts of stresses on the system, on the the planetary system, whether it's biodiversity or climate or financial or migration or whatever. You go on doing it, and things start to break, and it's just the same with a business. And so we now have dropped the idea of growth plans that are based on percentages or whatever. And we've made the business much more agile. And we go after work that really suits what our values are, what our clients are. And that has been a much more profitable approach. So in the process, we chopped probably 25% off our top line, off our turnover, and quadrupled our profit. And
extraordinary.
And
extraordinary.
And that ultimately, we're working really hard, but we're happier, and the business is more profitable, and those are the things that matter ultimately.
It sounds like, just rewinding to a couple of comments you made about the strategy plan being almost stuck to with a belligerence that you now regret. Is the strategy plan more of a kind of concept of, we'll align our work with our values?
It's in the bin.
Yeah. Okay. So it's more, this is how we work.
Yeah. So we do have a strategy plan that is aligned with our values now. You're quite right. The old strategy plan is in the bin. For one part of the business, that strategy plan has still got legs and we're still working with, which is the aftercare side of the business. But for the rest of it, it's become much more flexible, much more opportunistic, and much more built around our values and our understanding of who our clients are and how we achieve what they want. And that means that sometimes we have to take tough choices on, it's a hackneyed phrase, but, so sometimes, 3 really good opportunities come in and we know we can only do 2 of them, but you have criteria that you apply and clients are understanding, about that. And we only get the sort of work we want.
Yeah. Oh, John, as you know, because we've done this before on long journeys and what have you, we could do this for hours, but I'm conscious that we should wrap things there. I feel like we've had an amazing insight into 30 plus years running a business with some incredible lessons. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us.
I've enjoyed it. I haven't always enjoyed the journey, but it's an ongoing journey, and I've learned a lot from it.
No, I'm very grateful for your authenticity. Really kind. Thank you.
Great to see you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Behind the SME. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. It really helps others find the show. If you want to get in touch, you can find our email in the description. Until then, keep building, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.